Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to another Minecraft video. I'm gonna do a lot of Minecraft video shooting today. No, I'm not shooting Minecraft. No, I'm not like firing at Minecraft videos. No, producing Minecraft videos. Dang it. Anyways, one of the tradesmen wandered onto a campfire because he is obviously an idiot, apparently. Not just an idiot, an obvious idiot. Looks like one step worse than an idiot. Come on. Guys, I have to get back to the mines quick. Whatever. Go, 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 go. Any rate, like, what I also need to do is, basically, like, you know. Yeah, basically, like, you know. Yes, very good explanation of what you're gonna do. Yeah, great job. Great job there. Anyways, like what I'm actually gonna do isn't that. What I'm gonna do is basically I'm just gonna mine some more and then, you know, find diamonds. I hope. Then I'm also going to add another mine shaft on top of this mine shaft, creating a double mine shaft. Also, I may have to cut this video short in like 6 minutes. Sorry, guys. Like, not cut this video short, but like, yeah. I have to like stop a segment, if that makes any sense. Yeah. Segmented. Lava. Lava biatch. Lava biatch. Lava. 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 Oh, lava. Lava. What can I do about it? Literally nothing. It's just there. You know, what can you do? It's lava. It's just a reality of life. Can't really do anything about the reality of life. Because it's life. Yeah, lava's gonna exist. Can't stop lava from existing. Because lava's gonna exist. Lava can do lava. My place to judge. Did I pass that torch? Yeah, I passed the torch. God damn it. Okay. Now I have to walk all the way back. You know, like, now do you see why this torch is so useful? Like, seriously. Without it, you'd pretty much be screwed anyways. Alright. I'm gonna have to cut off in like 3 minutes. Diamonds!
Are you almost ready for Mary?
Yeah, I am. I'm almost ready for class. Alright, anyways. Diamonds! Alright, yeah, basically I get diamonds because, you know, diamonds are epic. Like, frankly, I like diamonds. Diamonds in Minecraft is best.
Okay, Jordan, I just sent the PowerPoint.
Alright.
You're going to be doing with you.
Okay.
Okay. And
Alright.
she had said you were
I'm gonna have to cut off the video, so bye guys. Alright guys, I'm back. Let's do this. Let's go. Anyways, I have to go mining. Go mining, and I gotta go fishing. And I got to eat the fish. Diamonds! Diamonds! I found 40 diamonds. Not just now, but like, seriously, I have 40 diamonds in my inventory. Heavens is too close, the time's a man. Not yet, feels one for one. Heavens is the king that is. Yeah, feels one for one. Heavens is the king that is. Whoa. I got to eat me. I'm feeling about hey mom, can you turn up that Alexa?
I'm trying to hear about schooling for the fall.
I want you to turn it up. Thanks.
I heard from one teacher who gave his personal laptop to a student who struggled to participate in distance learning.
Alright.
Joining us now is Natalie Nolan, Professor of Educational Technology at George Washington University. Natalie Nolan, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
When you joined us back in March, Natalie, you were careful to distinguish that what was happening was emergency remote teaching, not online teaching. 6 months later, is that still the case?
I will say absolutely yes. However, it has to be better than it was in the spring. In the spring,
My
teachers and
about
school
20
systems
minutes.
only had only a
Just giving you
couple of
a
Yeah,
weeks,
brief.
I'm just
one
listening
week,
to
some
NPR
even
and getting no
days
copies from me.
to shift to online virtual teaching and learning. Now school systems have between 6 to 8 weeks, at least in the DC metro region, so it should be better, but I'm still calling it emergency remote teaching and learning because we can't, the pandemic still exists. That we haven't, we're still in a pandemic and we're still teaching and learning in a pandemic, and all of the things, all the stresses that we have had for months now, they still exist.
Natalie, what should schools be doing to make sure digital learning is effective this fall, especially compared to the rush rollout in the spring?
There's a lot of things that they can be doing. One in particular
So yeah,
is
basically
for
I'm just
teachers
going
to
to
be getting professional development, and professional development not only about how to use various digital tools, but also about, we have to recognize that we have another pandemic that's going on, so we have to incorporate anti-racist and anti-oppressive teaching practices. And along those lines, trauma-informed teaching practices. So professional development that gets at how to prepare students for learning, no matter what the situation is, whether it's blended or online. How can they best learn? How can schools help parents also do that? Schools should be working towards equipping families with the necessary equipment, or rather students with the necessary equipment that they might need. There's a slew of things I think that they can be doing
Yeah,
to help
so
with that
anyways,
transition. They
like,
should be reaching out to the communities, also informing them about what's going to happen and when and how to get help.
Here is Richard in Tacoma
like what I
Park,
can
Maryland.
do
Richard,
is
you're on
make
the air. Go
all
ahead,
this stuff
Yeah, I am a parent of a
cool,
child and a husband
nicely.
of a teacher at a private school. Tacoma has been a preparatory school here in Tacoma Park, Montgomery County. And we got a letter this morning that stated that the individual at Montgomery County that had made the edict previously that had been barred by the governor has put out a new edict. I guess he dug deeper into the laws and whatever he had reached into in the first place, and found a new way to keep the edict in place. And so that, from our understanding, I'm a vice president at Washington Adventist University in Tacoma Park as well. That mandate is back in place and is.
So yeah,
My
basically,
understanding
like,
is for K through 12, but we're looking at it and considering what it means for only 4 years university.
Are you saying that the mandate came from County Executive Mark Ellis, who I believe also lives in Tacoma Park? Is that who the mandate came from, or from the chief health officer?
The chief health officers, to my understanding, the letter that we got this morning put it back in place with a different angle on a way for them to keep that edict in place.
Are you aware of that?
Yeah, I think that was sort of what I was trying to point to earlier. The county health officer, Travis Gales, issued an order last night,
so yeah,
essentially,
basically, I can
saying
run
that
my own
they are still, that the order that would bar private schools from operating in person until October 1st is still in place, and that the county is still reviewing Hogan's directive that they can't do that.
Okay, I'd like to bring Grace Poole into this conversation. Grace is a DCPS parent, DC Public School parent, and the leader of Digital Equity in DC Education. Grace Poole, thank you so much for joining us. Hi, Grace Poole, are you there? We seem to have dropped Grace Poole for a while, but as we try to get her back, let's hear from Suzanne in Pasadena, Maryland. Suzanne, you're on the air. Go ahead, please.
Yes, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. I'm a teacher. I've been teaching for over 20 years. the specials like art and that are coming to the classroom. Gym can be outside, but I'm assuming if it's raining, it'll be in the classroom. They're not allowed to share any kind of material. They're not allowed to play. And I want you to think about whether they'd like for your 4 and 5-year-olds to be stuck still in this environment where they can't see the teacher smile, they can't interact with students, which is so important, such an important part of developmental kindergarten. And I think sometimes when we're not someone who's been in the classroom, it's hard to understand those little intricacies of what's going to happen.
Madam, anyone care to respond? We only have about 40 seconds or so left in this segment, so I'm going to go to a break and we'll come back and make sure that everybody who we're talking to is there. In the meantime, you can still call us at 800-433-8850. Are you a student in the Washington region? Tell us about your experience with remote learning last spring. 800-433-8850. You can send us a tweet at Culture Show or email to culture@wamu.org. B tweets as a mom of a middle schooler. I know this is learning is a great idea, but it is a responsible thing to do. I do worry that children will miss out tremendously academically and emotionally.
Emeralds. Nice. Yeah, like I'm just going to do a full excavation of block levels 5 through 16 through 5, so, you know. Why? Because I want all the resources within them. Basically, a full org search for those block levels. Why? Because I want to build a diamond castle in survival, goddammit. And you're gonna watch me do it. No bats, no nothing. Just 100% epic diamond castle survival. Married.
I want to talk to you about some birthday requests that you had. When you have a moment.
Oh, seriously. I'm so professional. I make eggs out of
Alright, well, come to your office.
This mine has a serious infestation. Jeez. Anyways, like, seriously. This infestation is out of hand. let's see. Do I have any space left in my inventory? No. Do I have any hearts left? No. Yes, I have a luminous infrastructure. Generating light since forever. Since ever. Generating light since ever. Yes. There's a luminous infrastructure. Anyways, like, these lights are luminous, but torch fuel, yay. Torches, more torches. Oh yeah, right. I need to connect to green lamps. Ha ha. Ha ha. Just saw one little Alright, now I should be able to continue mining. Me, thanks.
when schools closed in March, schools opened, and they distributed laptops
Alright,
and
so now I just have to continue the tunnel. Emeralds!
for the upcoming school year, Emerson Public Schools is currently surveying parents about their needs and plans to distribute the devices sometime before the fall. You know, I also heard from particular parents who are unsatisfied with the laptop distribution. Learning over the summer, you know, there were some issues with devices being plugged in or being too slow, and schools sort of
Yeah,
going
these
about
long
using
looking
devices
tunnels.
as
And basically, you need them in order to mine stuff. Just don't get lost. These are sending that. Anyways, wait. All you need to do is just not get lost. Sounds easy, right? Wrong! It's really hard, actually. Anyways. Is this the right way? This is not the right way. Because that is the right way. Oh fuck, I'm out of here. Oh, come on. It just had to be night, didn't it? It just had to be at level 32, didn't I? Go gambit, go gambit, go gambit, go. Oh. Alright, also, Biwa Sleep Wraith. Play for quite a while now. Are these things called Sleep Wraiths? The Wraiths. Kill if you don't sleep. Okay, phew, it's turning the daytime. Good. That good. Fish? Fish. Oh yeah, right, not that. Right click, not left click. Alright, it's gonna be a big one. pufferfish, you've got to be kidding me. Like, seriously, I want food. Pufferfish is not food, it's poison. You should know this. If you've ever eaten a pufferfish, you wouldn't know this. Why? Because you instantly die if you eat a pufferfish. If it's not prepared properly. Basically, they have poison glands, which is, if someone dares you to eat a pufferfish, don't do it. They obviously are trying to kill you. In fact, press charges for attempted murder if someone dares you to eat a pufferfish. Because they legit tried to murder you if they dare you to eat a pufferfish. Because pufferfish are very, very poisonous. Sorry about the beeping, that's my mom's oven. No, literally, it's actually an oven owned by my mom. Alright, gone fishing. Fishing! Gone fishing! I smell the ching I'm making by fishing. At least I'm making fish, which I can eat when I'm mining. A bowl. Yeah, fish. Yeah, fish. Anyways. No. Yeah, catching fish. Bitch! Catching fish! Bitch! Yeah, like, I can catch all the fish I want. Don't feel so powerless. Efficiency. To do something about something. Something so inevitable. Something as inevitable as, say, the being efficiency. I do feel powerless, because there are efficiency.
Ow, Mom, I hurt my leg.
What would you like me to do? I need to get this stuff out of the oven. You're like racing around and being silly, and that doesn't help.
Did you tell Mom
I'm
that
kind of recording a video.
Did you tell Mom that she's such a mom?
No, I'm kind of recording a video. Leave me alone.
Never say never, never.
Jasmine, stop singing that song. I'll get copy struck.
Turn away, Jordan. Your tone is over the top for her just coming in and talking to you.
She was singing a copyrighted song. Jasmine, stop.
Jasmine, get away from him! Now! You both, if you don't get your act together, are not going to the pool. Or having treats today.
I have enough fish to cook this one.
Well, the law at NBC requires that guardians ensure that their children are attending school, and that if they're not doing that, the guardians themselves can be charged with a misdemeanor, and they can, more importantly, and probably more likely, is that they can be sent to Child Family and Services Agency, which is the Child Protective Services Agency, ABC, and be held with educational neglect liability. But that's one problem. The children themselves can also be found to be truant and be put through court processes, which all of those penalties add to the stress that families are currently experiencing from the pandemic. In addition to unemployment, loss of family members.
Tons of food, da 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 da, tons of food, tons of food, da 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 da, tons of food.
It's very overwhelming for many families, and I agree with the GW professor that we need to make education responsive in light of all of that.
And the tons of food, tons of food, tons of food. And reading tons of food, tons of food, tons of food.
so appreciate the distinction Natalie makes about the difference between emergency remote teaching and distance/online teaching. I worry that we will still be at emergency remote teaching this fall, which candidly isn't good for anyone involved, but Natalie, our caller, didn't seem to be pretty satisfied with what was happening last time.
Yes, and I think there's one thing to keep in mind is that we're all experiencing what's going on in our lives in different ways. One person might have a family member who's died, another person might not even know anyone who's gotten sick. Similarly, some students are having truly awesome learning experiences, really in a very seamless way, and others are just not. So I think that's another thing that we need to recognize, and I think that idea of how can we make this the most equitable for everybody is really one of the greatest challenges that we have right now across the board.
Debbie, John, what are you doing as you talk to teachers, kids, and parents about the
Yeah, I told you so, slave wraiths. We'll just bug it. Yeah, basically these slave wraiths will just bug the absolute hell out of me. I haven't slept in a game. If you're wondering, if you're tired enough, in the nether realm, I dropped loot. They're actually pretty fun. Hey, this is an epic dream. I'm fighting legit space demons. Fighting way demons.
Whether it's in Virginia or in other states, it should be solely addressed. I do know.
I think what we're discussing is more for the politics hour. It sounds like a good topic for the politics hour to talk about. This broadcast is speaking more
Then magically conjured up intimate memories.
provides it. But thank you for your calls.
Find out this is a phantom membrane.
That's a great question. At PIP, we have worked over the past 3 years to become a So what we have done is made sure that down to second grade, every student has a Chromebook, equipment of choice, and that every staff member had a working computer, and that we had a reserve of each of those. When COVID hit, we bought more Chromebooks to support students down to 4th grade, and provide our pre-K3 and pre-K3 up to 4th grade students with tablets as well. And in our normal buying process for the next year, we made sure that we bought through our...
I wonder where those things come from.
Funding, we bought an adequate
Yeah.
amount of every student had a Chromebook. So
There we go. Another one.
will have a Chromebook that they will be using for distance learning as well as when they return to school. And we did all that without...
Now comes the normal mobs. Spiders, skeletons, that kind of stuff.
Depending on the features and what the subjects were.
Creepers.
What we did do in the transition to COVID
Definitely take sheets.
and worked with teachers to make sure that those who weren't necessarily being behind the device at home in their new classroom, which maybe they're living in or they're
Right. Anyways, like, you know.
they needed to work through with the teachers and other students in the class.
We got a call from
Got
Sarah.
two phantom membranes out of that. Pretty happy.
We in the area seem to forget there are large areas of the country without internet and cell access. What do those students do when it's time to go to class? Are there any such areas in our direct region as far as we know that we found that there are? How are the county officials dealing with that?
Yeah, so there are what you would call internet centers in DC.
Options. I don't have it.
You
Good.
know, even outside of that, there are just families who can't afford to pay for internet.
I'm getting
And so
both.
school systems have been distributing hotspots to families. We've also been encouraging families to sign up for free internet services that some of the providers are very challenging to get around. So they rely on things like their phone and how they use their phone, but you know, that can only go for so long before you get down.
Extremely creative and do awesome things in the classroom, as well as outside the classroom to make sure that students are engaged. We engage social media in various different ways, allowing students to do various different contests on TikTok and stories and things like that.
Oh, great. Yes, I'm here. Also, the whole if you die in a dream, you die in real life thing, that's not true, No, yeah, Wraith 3. Just how I like it. Now I got sheep. Yeah, sheepy sheepy. Yeah, sheepy sheepy. That's enchanted. Okay, so that's a day's worth of fish. One night. Which is really bad. Gosh, that doesn't give me much time to search for. Oh, it's junk. String is junk in fishing. String is fishing junk. Ah, fuck you. Come on, I used the shield. That should have worked. Damn it. Gotta use the old water bucket trick now. Comes time to get back. Observation. If you fall from a high place, you got to click on the water bucket right as you're falling. You'll actually get there. Actually deploy the water. And it works. Let me demonstrate. Superstition, ability. Sure. Fuck you. Okay, I suck at this, but whatever. Alright, anyways.
My name's Jen Sweetman, and my kids have grown a lot.
Oh,
and
I
we're
almost
just
forgot.
getting back into riding. And I was wondering, they wanted new breeches to ride with. Do you guys have access to dressing rooms available? Okay, I know Target didn't, and I paid before driving all the way out there. I would check on that. Okay, great. Well, then we will swing by tomorrow. Okay, that sounds good. I don't need an appointment, but I can just give you a call from when we're in the parking lot. Fantastic. Okay, well, thank you very much, and you have a great day.
Very dangerous. That is a very dangerous hole. But yeah. Alright, gone fishing. Actually, I'm gonna end the video here. So like, hey guys, I'm back. Let's do this. What the hell? Huh? Minecraft. The lag is over 9,000. Sorry about the outdated meme. Sorry about the... Jake, I need to use the restroom, so I'll be back in a sec. Bye guys. And I'm just gonna leave the video going. No, I'm not. Alright guys, I'm back. Let's do this. Alright, so anyways, let's just say, Alexa, play NPR.
Live from NPR, here's WAMU 88.5. Support for WAMU comes from American Fuel and Petrochemical Manufacturers, innovating PPE solutions to better care for caregivers. Learn more at wemakeprogress.org.
how enormously stupid, what criminal negligence it took to leave a high explosive material right in the very heart of this city. You know, within yards of people, within yards of people's homes and their businesses. And the authorities here knew. They'd been warned that these chemicals were dangerous and that they were a great risk to Beirut and Lebanon.
The BBC's Quentin Somerville. When the French President Emmanuel Macron toured the damaged streets of Beirut yesterday, he was asked if France would take back control. There is a petition circulating in Lebanon calling for just that, for Lebanon to be put under a French mandate for the next 10 years. It's got 58,000 signatures. Mr. Macron said that France cannot instigate a revolution, that it's up to the Lebanese people. He added, "I will support the Lebanese people, but I will not interfere in Lebanese politics." He also said, "Because it's you, because it's us, we will not let you down." That clearly refers to the long and deep relationship between Lebanon and its former colonial power. The former BBC correspondent Jim Muir, who is a long-time resident of Beirut, is on the line now to delve into this relationship a bit more. Jim, good to have you back on the programme. Can you start by giving us a brief history lesson, please, of French involvement in Lebanon?
Well, the French have always been historically interested in the area, and in fact, after the collapse of when Turkey, the Ottoman Empire, was the sick man of Europe, they were kind of competing with the British to stake their claims for influence in the region, and had the Sykes-Picot Agreement, etc., under which Lebanon and Syria broadly fell under French sway, not necessarily as states, but as areas for French influence. So in fact, France was then, by the League of Nations, granted the mandate for Lebanon from 1923, and that ran on till 1946, after Lebanon, in fact, became independent. So there were obviously checkered relations during that time, because many Lebanese wanted to be independent, of course, and fought for independence. But there are long historical ties. The French, in general, you could say, were associated largely historically with the Christian population, and the Christians were kind of seen as Lebanon's window to the west, as it were, with France as the main kind of alma mater sort of thing. And many Lebanese have very strong ties, including the politicians who have both personal and political ties with France. So there's a huge amount of people kind of coming and going, and France in a way sort of sees it as having some kind of historical responsibility for Lebanon.
And before the bomb block, before the explosion, and before the multiple crises that Lebanon is facing at the moment, how did Beirutis tend to look back on French involvement?
It's really
well, France was involved in the 1980s. The Americans led a so-called multinational force after the Israeli invasion to kind of fill the vacuum, and it was composed of the Americans, French, Brits, and Italians, all the old colonial powers, you might say, with the Americans leading the phrase the new colonial powers. And they are all sort of still, in a way, jostling in that fray. Many Lebanese have a soft spot for France, but others see it as an imperial power which should be fended off at all costs. And Mr. Macron's visit has sort of brought out those differences, or those splits, where you have, nearly 60,000 people signing a petition asking for the French mandate to come back, which is a sign, I think, of just the sheer desperation, because for many Lebanese, this was just the last kick in the gut when, in terms of corrupt politicians, they can't see any other way of getting the politicians, the sectarian leaders, who have such a strong and deeply entrenched grip on power. They can't see any other way of breaking it than to have somebody else from outside. So obviously it's fantasy the French are not going to come back, but it's a measure of their desperation. Whereas others, of course, think that Mr. Macron was heavily interfering in Lebanese affairs, and that he should have shut up and just provided some aid without strings.
How useful can any outside parties be to Lebanon at this time?
Sorry, the line dropped out slightly. How useful could that be?
How useful could any outside parties be to Lebanon at this time? Just very briefly, Jim, if you would.
Well, it is a very complex situation here, because, the Lebanese are engaged in very crucial talks with the IMF, who say they're willing to help bail Lebanon out through its very, very existential financial crisis. And France is one of the countries which has, through those negotiations, along with the Americans and others, there should be radical reform reforms, which most Lebanese want. That's why so many thousands turned out in support of the so-called revolution last October. Many of them are just deeply fed up with their own politicians, and if the aid thing in a way could be used as a lever to get the politicians to the side, that would be good.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Distribution of the BBC World Service News Hour in the United States is made possible by American Public Media, producer and distributor of award-winning public radio content, APM, American Public Media, with support from Fidelity Wealth Management, where advisors work with clients to develop investment strategies that can evolve as their needs change. Learn more at fidelity.com/wealth. Fidelity Brokerage Services, LLC.
You're listening to the BBC News Hour on WAMU 88.5. It's 9:50 on this Friday morning. And that means in 10 minutes on Monday, it's the Friday News Roundup.
As millions look to Congress for a new deal, Mitch McConnell looks to members of his own party.
Yeah, it's a problem. I mean, there are about 20 of my members who think we've already done enough.
Facebook and Twitter suspend the president's campaign account for going too far, and Chief Justice Roberts comes under fire for not going far enough. I'm Jen White. It's the Friday News Roundup, next time on 1A. Listen this morning from 10 to noon on WAMU 88.5 or online at 1A.org.
And then at noon on the Politics Hour, D.C.'s delegate to Congress Eleanor Holmes Norton joins us. Also, Maryland State Senator Cheryl Kagan weighs in on the feud over closing private schools in Montgomery County. Politics Hour from noon to 1.
Support for WAMU comes from Comcast Business, helping businesses adapt to a different economic landscape. Comcast Business offers products and services to help businesses with their reopening and improvement plans. More at ComcastBusiness.com. University of Maryland Global Campus, offering bachelor's and master's degrees for today's in-demand careers. Learn more at umgc.edu. Certified to operate in Virginia by Chev. Comcast Internet Essentials. It's never been more important to keep everyone connected. Since 2011, Comcast has connected millions of low-income homes to the internet, so they can be ready for anything.
This is NewsHour. Today is a first for British Vogue. It's the first international collaboration across the title worldwide. It's called Hope and it features activists from different walks of life. It's also the first time the cover has been shot by a black male photographer. Nisana Harriman is his name, and he came to the attention of Vogue UK through his widely shared photographs of the anti-racism protests in London, following the killing of George Floyd, an unarmed African-American, by Minnesota police in the US. Shooting the cover of Vogue is a very big deal, he told me.
I think if you look at the events that have happened leading up to this, and the fashion industry as a whole is still hugely influential, and it influences so many other industries as well. So having Edward Hemingway, editor-in-chief of British Vogue, and he is the man that decided to give me this opportunity to show to the world that the door can be ajar and should be ajar for people that look like me, that have the ability but have never had the opportunity.
And can you tell us about your own experience of not having opportunities because of your colour?
I think my experience is unique because my trajectory has been extraordinarily fast. I mean, I picked up a camera only 3 years ago, so I've had opportunity after opportunity, if I'm being honest with you. But even with the photographs that I've been taking and the reaction that I've been taking, it's taken Edward, someone at the very peak of his industry, to give me this type of opportunity, which I believe is still very, very telling. So if you can imagine, if you're not me and you don't have the contacts or exposure that I've had, but you have the talent, how on earth are you going to be noticed? I want people that are looking for talent to cast further afield so they can give more chances to people that truly deserve to be seen.
And tell us about the photographs that drew you to his attention. I understand that taking some of them was a very emotional experience for you.
I've done a lot of crying over the last few months, and I've been doing a lot of that whilst holding a camera, which is a really strange experience for me. By going out and really being at the tip of the spear, if you like, of the London anti-racist movement, I've seen so much hope, so much solidarity and pain. When I talk about open wounds, which is what the lingering scars of institutional racism is, that so many people don't even realize how many open wounds they have until this moment happens. So many of the people I've been shooting have had the same lived experience as me, and I feel that.
Does your lived experience as a black man, when you're taking photographs of people who, as you say, feeling very wounded at the moment, does it make a difference to have that shared experience?
Yeah, of course. And I talk about, institutional racism can be subtle, and it can be sort of what I call death by a thousand cuts. I give this example of the black taxi service in London, where my record in a single day has been 13 cabs that have driven past me. My wife, who is white, now when we go out, goes to the theatre, she hails a cab down because I'm sick of that humiliation. And that's something a lot of my white friends would never even think about. They stick their hands out and the cab will stop immediately. That is a form of racism that people can understand because most people have hailed a taxi down.
Miss Anne Harriman, whose photos you can see on whatwesee.com. Taiwan's handling of the coronavirus has attracted international praise. The country has had no domestically transmitted cases since April, and the total infection stands at just 477, with 7 deaths. The island's digital minister, Audrey Tang, has been praised as a key figure. A renowned free software programmer and entrepreneur who helped develop a platform displaying mask availability across stores that's hugely helped authorities to share information with the public, and was later taken up by South Korea. She told me how it all works, and I tried to keep up.
In Taiwan, we made sure that anybody who shows any symptoms, or really anyone at all, is calm and collected by making sure that everybody can get 9 medical masks every 2 weeks, or if you are a child. And a map that's contributed by the civil society engineers made sure that people can look at their nearby pharmacies on the map and navigate to the one that still have medical masks in stock. People will then be able to put on a mask, go to a local clinic if they have symptoms, rest assured that there will be no financial or social burden if they developed COVID-like symptoms.
What about getting tests? How did technology help there?
In Taiwan, we never had a lockdown for the pandemic, and we never do takedown for the infodemic. And so what we concentrate on is on the border. When people return to Taiwan on the airport, whether they show symptom or not, they're asked to either go to a quarantine hotel for 14 days, or if they live in a place where they have their own bathroom and live with no vulnerable people, they can choose to home quarantine and put their phone instead in the quarantine. That's called a digital fence. And the phone, instead of an app or GPS or Bluetooth, there's nothing that they need to install. Rather, the nearby cell phone towers measures by signal strength and send an SMS if the triangulation is broken, so that if you stay at that like 50-meter or so radius for 14 days, we pay you $33 a day as a stipend. But if you break out of it, SMS is sent to the local police institutions, and if you do break the quarantine, you pay us back 1,000 times that, so you can fund 1,000 more quarantine people.
It sounds incredibly efficient and very strict. Immediately, 2 things strike me. One is that it depends on basic human trust, doesn't it? Did the population trust your government enough to allow them all this access, or did they not have a choice?
There's a saying that anything that's alive when I'm born is human nature. Anything that's invented after I'm born is technology. In choosing technologies, we make sure that we only use technologies that people are already familiar with. The mass distribution interface was the same as the prescription interface for the pharmacies. The SMS notification is exactly the same interface as when people receive the advanced flood warning when a typhoon comes, or an advanced earthquake warning seconds before the earthquake actually hits. We make sure that people feel more comfortable with that, as opposed to, for example, asking them to turn on GPS or install any app.
What about older people in Taiwan? Are they all tech savvy enough to use this?
Well, if they don't have a phone, we give them a phone upon entry and put that phone in their home quarantine. Or if they're not interested in digital fence, of course, they can always choose the hotel quarantine method, in which case they're physically barred from leaving for 14 days. We only do this for people who return at borders.
Could you have kept kept on top of the coronavirus as successfully without the technology use?
Before we had this technology and before we had a Central Epidemic Command Center, in the SARS 1.0 in 2003, the local government were saying very different things from the central government, and there certainly wasn't a mask that shows the availability of masks, so there's a lot of panic on of N95 masks and so on, and we didn't do that successfully at the time. There was like 37 deaths directly related to SARS 1.0, and this time around it stayed in the single digit.
Audrey Tang, Taiwan's digital minister. Thank you very much for staying with us here on NewsHour.
And you've been listening to the BBC NewsHour on WAMU 88.5. On this Friday morning, as we come up on 10 o'clock, the Friday News Roundup is up next on 1A.
I'm Allie Schweitzer with WAMU's Affordability Desk. The racial wealth gap in D.C. is staggering. By one assessment, white households have a net worth 81 times greater than black households in the district. And the pandemic is likely to deepen the inequality. Join me August 11th as we talk about ways of addressing the region's racial wealth gap during the coronavirus pandemic. To sign up, visit wamu.org/events.
This is WAMU Washington. We're your listener-supported NPR news station from American University in HD at 88.5 at WRAU 88.3 Ocean City, on your smart speaker and online at WAMU.org. It's 79 degrees in Northwest D.C., 77 in Fort Washington, and 75 in Ashburn at 10 o'clock.
Both parties say a new coronavirus aid package is coming. They just don't know when. From WAMU and NPR in Washington, this is 1A. Hi, I'm Jen White. Today on 1A, it's the Friday News Roundup. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has found himself between a rock and a hard place. On the one hand, he's wheeling and dealing with the Democrats. On the other, he's playing referee after infighting in his own party. Meanwhile, one school district after another backtracks on reopening plans. And Trump's latest one-on-one interview is what it is. As ever, we're looking forward to hearing from you too. Email us at 1a@wamu.org, comment on our Facebook page, or tweet us at 1a.
Live from NPR News, I'm Corva Coleman. Stocks opened lower this morning after the Labor Department reported a modest drop in the unemployment rate. NPR's Scott Horsley reports the Dow Jones Industrials fell about 100 points in early trading.
Unemployment inched down last month to 10.2% as U.S. employers added 1.8 million jobs. That's a significantly slower pace of job growth than we saw in June. Even with the improvement, the unemployment rate remained higher than the previous post-war recession. More than a quarter of the jobs added last month were in restaurants. Retailers also did a lot of hiring, but there are signs job growth slowed as the number of coronavirus infections climbed. With tens of millions of people still out of work, the road to full employment could be a long one, and Congress is still debating a new round of coronavirus relief measures. Scott Horsley, NPR News, Washington.
President Trump has signed an executive order imposing economic sanctions against the Chinese owners of the video-sharing app TikTok. It also targets the messaging service WeChat. NPR's Bobby Allen reports.
Trump invoked his emergency economic powers to declare TikTok and WeChat a national security threat. The order bans any transactions between the companies and U.S. consumers effective in 45 days. For TikTok, a hit video-sharing app, the order will likely force Apple and Google to remove the app from app stores. There are more than 100 million Americans who have already downloaded TikTok. Experts say the order will make it impossible for the app to receive system updates. The clampdown puts new pressure on Microsoft, which is in early talks to acquire the U.S. assets of TikTok. The White House believes the Chinese Communist Party could access the data and voice users to blackmail or spy on U.S. citizens. Bobby Allen, NPR News, San Francisco.
The city of Milwaukee has demoted its police chief in the aftermath of demonstrations against police brutality and racial injustice. From member station WWM, Dennis reports Milwaukee is facing backlash over its policing practices.
Last month, the Civilian Oversight Board, which has the power to fire the police chief, called for Chief Alfonso Morales to publicly acknowledge why his officers used tear gas and pepper spray on peaceful protesters. This week, Morales defended the actions of his officers, and on Thursday night, he was demoted. It remains unclear whether he will sue to get his job back.
Latoya Dennis reporting. The acting head of Homeland Security says federal agents remain in Portland, Oregon, where nightly protests continue against racial injustice. Chad Wolf told lawmakers federal officers have not been on the streets. This comes after an agreement between Oregon's governor and the Trump administration to draw down federal officers in Portland. On Wall Street, the Dow is down 93 points at 27,924. This is APM. Power outages persist in the Northeast in the aftermath of tropical storm Isaias. In Connecticut, hundreds of thousands of customers still lack power. Utility Eversource says it won't complete power restoration work until the middle of next week. In New York, utility Con Edison says more than 120,000 customers lack power. The nation's largest federally chartered power company has had a change of mind and will not assign information technology work to private firms. The Tennessee Valley Authority scrapped those plans after getting pressure from the White House. From member station WUOT, Brandon Hollingsworth has more.
TVA President Jeff Wyatt said the agency will immediately reverse course after meeting with Trump Chief of Staff Mark Bennett and White House Attorney Pat Cipollone. Lyash and the TVA were thrown for a loop this week when President Trump ended outsourcing plans, fired 2 TVA board members, including one of his own employees, Lyash as well. Trump called the decision to move the agency's IT work away from in-house employees a betrayal of American workers. TVA provides flood control in 7 southeastern cities. For NPR News, I'm Brandon Hollingsworth in Knoxville.
Ohio Governor Mike DeWine now says he's taken a more sensitive test for the coronavirus, and the test was negative. On Thursday, he took an earlier test, and it was positive for the virus ahead of a visit by President Trump. DeWine says he has no symptoms. The Ohio governor plans to take a third coronavirus test tomorrow to confirm the negative result. This is NPR.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Indeed, offering sponsored jobs, and tools like screening questions to help businesses find the high-impact hires who can make a difference. Learn more at Indeed.com/high-impact.
It's 10:06. You're listening to WWAI. I'm Jerry Mitchell. Happy Friday. Coming up today on Fresh Air, we'll talk about the great pitcher Santo Trey, enabling the Negro Leagues, and the racism that kept him in Major League Baseball until he was 42. We'll hear from Larry Tye, the author of Biography Satchel, The Life and Times of an American Legend. Join us today at 9 on WWAMU 88.5.
This is 1A. I'm Jen White in Washington. America's job numbers for July are out, and while we've brought back a sliver of the jobs lost in the pandemic, we have a long way to go. One thing that would help, a new round of coronavirus. Millions of Americans are waiting to see if Congress can reach an agreement, so let's start today's roundup on Capitol Hill. Our panel today, Jane Poston. She's the senior politics reporter. Jane, always great to have you on.
Thanks so much for having me.
Also with us, Shane Harris, the senior security reporter at the Washington Post. Shane, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me.
And Jim Tankersley, who covers taxes and the economy for the New York Times. His new book is called The Riches of This Land, an untold true story of America's middle class. Jim, thanks for joining us.
It's a real pleasure to be here. Thanks.
So aid negotiations continue to be one step forward, 2 steps back. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell is fighting a battle on 2 fronts, one with the Democrats and one with his own party. Jane, what's going on with Republicans here?
So Republicans are voicing concerns about potential debt because so much of this requires a great deal of spending in order to support American
Republicans who are still unemployed, still dealing with the impact of so many business closures that have followed the coronavirus pandemic, there's going to be a need for a lot of spending. And 4 months ago, the Senate passed the CARES Act 96-0. But now you're starting to see some internal animus among Senate Republicans, which is a divide between Senate Republicans in battleground states and Senate Republicans who have decided that the Tea Party might come for them again in a couple of months. And so you're seeing Colorado Senator Cory Gardner, Susan Collins talking about how the CARES Act aid is a central part of the re-election pitch. But then Ben Sasse of Nebraska, Rand Paul of Kentucky, and others are essentially saying that this is about, and I'll quote Ben Sasse here, this is about Democrats and Trumpers competing to outspend each other. And, I find this mildly amusing given that Senate Republicans were far less concerned when Republicans had control of Congress back in 2017 when they approved massive tax cuts. And while, yes, the deficit is set to reach a record high this year, that hasn't been a real concern for Republicans since 2016. As we'll remember, the president himself has said how much he loves debt. And so it's an interesting battle between a host of conservatives who are between the Stevens Moore of the world, who believe that payroll tax cuts are essential and that we can't have to curtail spending at any cost, and the Marcos Rubio of the world, who recognize that, yes, we are traditionally deficit hawks, but this isn't the time for that right now.
Well, Shane, where do the latest negotiations stand?
Well, they met last night for 3 hours and ended with no deal, and there's a chance of them coming back today, but the White House has signaled that if they feel that they can't get a deal with Democrats by the end of the day, that the president wants to move forward on what he thinks he can do through executive action. There's a big open question on how much he can actually do. Maybe he can move some money around. There's some questions on what he can legally do. But we may be at the impasse point here today. The White House just declared that the president will have nothing else to say today. He's up at his resort in Bedminster. So this may now move over to the White House unless somebody can pull that rabbit out of a hat with these negotiations today and this afternoon.
Well, President Trump said he's considering an executive order to suspend payroll taxes. Jim, how is this being received?
There was not a lot of support in Congress for the president's push to suspend or to cut payroll taxes when he wanted to do it legislatively, not even among Republicans. And that's part of the problem. To Jane's point here, there are factions of Republicans, and even among all the factions, none of them are really that excited about what the president wants to do with reducing the payroll taxes that workers pay for Social Security and Medicare temporarily to give them more money. It's not going to help the unemployed, for example. But Trump also wants to do some shifting of existing dollars to try to maintain some level of supplemental unemployment benefits. He wants to continue an eviction moratorium. And Democrats are upset about the idea that he is going to attempt to claim legal authority, that in many cases they say he doesn't have that. Nancy Pelosi yesterday said she would be happy for him to extend the eviction moratorium. So this is all the president, I think, trying to gain a lot of leverage in these talks. Democrats feel like they have a lot of leverage also. They are certainly the ones who are going to have to provide the bulk of the votes to pass anything. And, it's President Trump's economy. We are getting very close to the November election, and if the stimulus just runs out entirely and we have a big hit to consumer spending because people have suddenly less money in their pockets, that could be a real blow to the economy right as we run into the president's standing in front of those.
Well, Gene, talk a little bit more about the president's authority to possibly suspend payroll taxes. Can he do that legally?
It's unclear, but I also think it's interesting because even if you were to, there's no clear guarantee that workers would get any money out of that. He said that he could suspend the collection of payroll taxes through an executive order. It's unclear legally whether or not that's necessary. But if you're an employer and you are, the deferral of those taxes that employers just retain the employee share instead of giving the money to workers. Because again, we're in the midst of an economic crisis that's a result of a pandemic. And so employers are saying, there's no way that they would want to give that money over to workers if they themselves are concerned about what the future might look like.
We're talking to Jane Coaston, senior politics reporter at Fox, Shane Harris, national security reporter at the Washington Post, and Jim Takersley, who covers taxes and the economy for the New York Times. Well, a number of Americans filing for unemployment fell last week, but more than 16 million Americans are still collecting unemployment aid as the economy continues to falter. Jim, you Why did you decide to focus on that era for our current moment?
Well, I wrote a book which sort of asks the question of what's happened to the great American middle class that I think has existed for so long in our minds as this pillar of what we could have, you know, a time when the economy boomed and lifted incomes for millions of people and pulled them into the sort of economic security that we think of as the American dream. And that era ended. It ended in the sort of late 70s, early 80s. And so much of our politics today has been wrapped up in politicians promising to bring back those types of good times again. And I think in particular now, as we're in the second once-in-our-lifetime recessions of most of our lifetimes, we have an opportunity to rebuild the economy. And so I think the lessons of the post-World War II era are we need to pay real attention to the people who we're investing in as we do that. What we saw after World War II was in the decades that followed, was first with the necessity of the war effort, and then with the hard work of civil rights, gains for women and for non-white men have absolutely lifted economic growth and incomes across the board, and that pulled millions of Americans into the middle class. We can do it again because those workers are the ones who are struggling the most in this pandemic right now, and if we can find ways to lift them up, then I think we can see, you know, eventually, once this economy is back on track, a second great golden era for the middle class.
Well, a new set of job numbers dropped today. The economy added 1.8 million jobs last month. The jobless rate fell to 10.2%. Jim, what's your reaction to these numbers?
It's always great that we're adding jobs, and this is a big jobs number, but it's disappointing compared to what the last 2 months were, and it's, I think, a real sign of worry. Other real-time data show us that the economy is slowing down, the recovery is slowing down, and that's because the virus is certainly so we still have millions of Americans out of work. We have, you know, a real risk of those temporary layoffs that came at the start of the pandemic crisis turning into permanent layoffs where it could take a really long time to get people back to work. And now, you know, we have the unemployment supplemental benefits federally expiring at the end of last month. And so you have a lot of Americans who this month now are going to have a really difficult time making rent or putting food on the table. So all of that adds up to, yeah, it's great that we added more jobs and it beat some economists' expectations, but it's nowhere close to where we need to be to have a fully functioning working economy again.
And Jane, how much pressure is this putting on states to try to figure out their own reopening plans as they try to deal with unemployment numbers just in their local municipalities?
Well, it's important to say that states and cities are largely broke at this point, and so much of this is some of the economic recovery that we're kind of seeing right now is the result of seasonal adjustment that happens as we get towards the end of the summer and the beginning of the fall, especially with regard to hiring for schools. And so we are seeing that states and cities are also going to be asked to, in many areas, pay for the PPE necessary for, say, students and teachers to return to school, if that's going to be happening, which I know that we'll be discussing a little bit later. And so I think that this is a real challenge because a lot of states and cities were already facing fiscal crises before any of this happened, even before the coronavirus pandemic hit. And so as people are shifting from layoffs that, as you said, looked temporary but now are now becoming permanent, you are going to see more people applying for unemployment. And let's be clear, a lot of people were applying for unemployment assistance before the pandemic began. We are still dealing with some of the after effects of the Great Recession of 2008 and 2009. For many people, this economic recovery that they saw over the last couple of years has been trying to shore up to get back to 2008, 2009, and now we're facing another crisis. I know so many people have been focused on looking for a V-shaped recovery that would have a sharp downturn followed by a bounce back. But the growth across a range of economic indicators, as noted by the Washington Post, has tapered. And a lot of the business closures, because of the lack of support, because we're not getting an agreement on another round of relief legislation, because unlike some countries where they essentially just wrote checks to keep people at home, we've seen that this debate over unemployment insurance and this entire idea that unemployment insurance is fulfilling the need of an actual job for most people, which I think is uncognizant of how many people experience unemployment. I think that we're in the midst of a real crisis and it might get worse.
We're rounding up the week's news with Jane Poston of Fox, Shane Harris of the Washington Post, and Jim Tankersley of the New York Times. Coming up, we get into that Axios interview and discuss the results of America's last big primary day. I'm Jen White. This is 1A.
Also, I'm making a new weapon. A crash barrel. Yes, you can actually make those. Not just drop. They're not just poetry drops. You can actually make them. So that's awesome.
You're listening to WAMU 88.5. It's 10:18, 79 degrees, humid, partly cloudy in Northwest Washington, 77 in Rockville, and 77 in Woodbridge. Today at noon on the Politics Hour, D.C. Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton talks D.C. statehood, and Maryland State Senator Cheryl Kagan weighs in on the feud over closing private schools in Montgomery County. Listen today from noon to 1 on WAMU 88.5.
The uncertain fate of TikTok in the U.S. has some users anxious, but for most, even those who make money on the platform, it's business as usual.
So back in October, I got fired from Best Buy for making TikTok videos. 2 weeks later, I hit 1 million followers, and now I'm still making videos.
Creating TikToks when there soon might not be a TikTok. On the next All Things Considered from NPR News.
Listen from 4 to 8.
Support for WAMU comes from Comcast Internet Essentials. It's never been more important to keep everyone connected. Since 2011, Comcast has connected millions of low-income homes to the internet, so they can be ready for anything.
It's 10:20.
Support for NPR comes from this station and from C3. C3.ai software enables organizations to use artificial intelligence at enterprise scale, solving previously unsolvable business problems. Learn more at C3.ai. From Hint, maker of fruit-infused water with no sweeteners or calories. Hint's 25 flavors include blackberry, lemon, and clementine. In stores or at drinkhint.com. And from the Annie E. Casey Foundation.
I'm Jen White, and it's the Friday News Roundup. We're talking about the week's top stories with Jane Poston, senior politics reporter at Fox, Shane Harris, national security reporter at the Washington Post, and Jim Tankersley, who covers taxes and the economy for the New York Times. We're also talking with you. You can comment on our Facebook page, tweet us at 1A, or send us an email at 1a@wamu.org. Well, 16 of America's 20 largest school districts are planning for remote learning ahead of September, but New York City is still deciding what to do with its 1.1 million public school students. Jane, Mayor Bill de Blasio released a blended learning plan. Where does that stand?
So I think that the plan, it's gotten a lot of feedback, obviously, from a lot of parents, and even if you just observe the conversations on Twitter, which are, it's fascinating because you see a lot of parents who are very concerned about their children attending, but also want their children to be attending school, which I think really matches with the national mood. You've seen some regions in Georgia, for example, where students are being sent back, and students who post pictures of students not wearing masks are being suspended from school. But then in other areas, in Maryland, for example, and D.C., where I live, you're seeing students being, virtual school being proposed for the year. And so I think that the divide taking place in New York City and the reaction to that, where you have doctors tweeting about how they want their children to return to school and people angrily replying to them about it, I think that gets at that there really is no perfect solution to this, as we are in the midst of a pandemic where we still remain unclear exactly what the long-term effects of COVID-19 might be on children. And while some children aren't immune, comes to the president, what those long-term impacts might be, especially on students and teachers who are interacting with students every day, or teachers and administrators, I should say.
Well, Governor Andrew Cuomo cast doubts on Mayor de Blasio's plan. Shane, when we look across the country, how is this friction over New York's plan emblematic of what's happening in other districts?
I think you're seeing for a lot of big cities, they're facing exactly this dilemma that Jane is laying out. And as they're getting closer to the date where they have to make a decision, they are, in many cases, deciding to pull back. You saw that happen actually in Chicago, where it looked like there was a plan to maybe do something of a blended model like you had in New York, and ultimately the mayor said, no, we can't do this, we've got to bring everyone back in. New York is kind of, you know, in some ways the big experiment. It is this huge school district. Obviously the city was disproportionately affected in many respects by the impact of the virus. And so people, I think, look to New York City and say, okay, if they can make this work in some kind of a blended way where the kids go to school 1 to 3 days a week, they're home for some of that time, they try and do testing and tracing and contain the virus when it spreads, because I think inevitably there are people who are going to get infected. Maybe they can learn lessons from that, but it's almost like nobody really wants to be the one to jump first and assume all of the liability that might come along with that, particularly in a big city where you've got, you know, in New York, more than 1 million students. That is a logistical and policy nightmare waiting to happen.
Well, the camera company Kodak was given a $765 million loan to start manufacturing pharmaceutical ingredients by the Trump administration. Shares of Kodak soared the day before the announcement, which has raised concerns over insider trading. Now, the Securities and Exchange Commission is now investigating Kodak's handling of the deal. Jim, this suspicion was raised by Democratic Senator Elizabeth Warren. Can you tell us a bit more about the timeline here and why there's concern?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the concern dates to the idea that, you know, if the government is making a big decision that's going to affect a company's outlook or its share price, you shouldn't be able to trade on that if you're someone who knows it before anybody else. And in this case, there seems to be some real evidence that there was a lot of that going on within Kodak or around Kodak before this announcement. And so there's the narrow issue of, hey, is there insider trading here? There's the broader issue of the Trump administration has aggressively intervened with individual companies throughout the president's time in office. The Kodak contract is just one example. I mean, just in the last few weeks, the president has tried to broker a sale of TikTok to Microsoft and claimed that he wanted money to go to the Treasury Department for making the sale happen. I mean, these are things that, in general, in the past, lawmakers, including especially Republican lawmakers, have raised real questions about when presidents start to, as they say, pick winners or losers in the economy. Here, though, it appears that there's just a lot of money on the line in all of this, and the chance for people to get rich, and senators are raising concerns about whether that was fairly done.
Well, there's additional scrutiny coming from Democratic-led congressional committees stressing the company's lack of experience in pharmaceuticals. How is Kodak responding?
I mean, I think you know, Kodak is in a very difficult spot here because this is obviously a very lucrative contract, but they are, you know, they are not, as you say, they are not traditionally pharmaceutical makers, and so I think there's just a lot more that we're going to find out beyond the initial investigations that will give us more insight into how they were chosen, what their expertise are, and whether this actually has a chance to work out positively for the country.
Let's turn to an interview that's gotten a lot of attention this week, and an episode of Axios on HBO that aired Monday night. President Trump discussed his handling of the coronavirus pandemic with Axios national political correspondent Jonathan Swan, and that interview did not go well for the president.
We're going to look. Let's look. And if you look at death, start to go up again. Well, right here, the United States is lowest in numerous categories. We're lower than the world. Lower than Europe. In what? In what? Take a look. Right here. Here's case death.
Oh, you're doing death as a proportion of cases. I'm talking about death as a proportion of population. That's where the US is really bad.
Well,
much worse than South Korea, Germany, etc.
You can't do that. You have to go by where.
So I just want a bit of a round robin here. Can each of you describe that interview in one word, Jane?
I believe the term I actually want to use is not permitted on this radio station, so I will say that it's a show that is, it is bad. It is very bad. And I think that it's indicative of one of the most important elements of journalism is to always keep asking follow-up questions, which I think Jonathan did really effectively. And I think that there's also a sense that this is an interview for which he should have been extremely prepared. There is a convincing defense. There is a strong argument that you could say about America's case fatality rate. That is, you could make an argument for our innovative healthcare system or healthcare workers. He could have talked about how there's been an underperformance by countries that some views having single-payer government-run healthcare systems, and he did not do that. He did not do that at all. Instead, he accused South Korea of covering up bad data, which just seems, again, the term I actually want to use is not permitted on National Public Radio.
Shane, what about you?
The word I would use is predictable. The president does not do well traditionally in these kinds of one-on-one interviews when he is confronted with facts, and I think the reason for that is that his White House staff is not telling him about these grim statistics that Jonathan Swan, correctly pointed out to him, that he is being told the rosier pictures, he's being told things that maybe can be spun a little bit more positively, and he's not engaging with the information. I mean, to me, this is like, we have seen sort of this play before. It was quite vivid in its detail here, and Jonathan Swan did a great job of pressing him, but to me, it's quite predictable and not surprising that the president handled it this way.
Yeah, we also saw him get flustered in a recent interview with Chris Wallace on Fox News. Jim, your word?
I would say detached. I mean, this is just sort of detached from the reality that Americans are seeing from the virus. And, it's one thing to spin. The White House is good at spinning. Today they said, they triumphantly declared that America's had its strongest 3-month period of job growth ever, even though that followed the worst crash in jobs ever, which they didn't even mention. But in this case, the president, I think he's saying things that most Americans recognize are just detached from the reality of the virus, both in the graphs that they see and just in the experience of their community around them. And I think that's why he is struggling to convince the American people that he has a handle on this and that his performance with the virus is good.
That's Jim Tankersley, who covers taxes and the economy for the New York Times. Also with us, Shane Harris, national security reporter for Washington Post, and Jane Poston, senior politics reporter at Fox. Jane, President Trump also went after the late Congressman John Lewis and attempted to downplay his role in history. Let's take a listen.
John Lewis is lying in state in the U.S. Capitol. How do you think history will remember John Lewis?
I don't know. I really don't know. I don't know. I don't know John Lewis. He chose not to come to my inauguration. He chose. I never met John Lewis, actually. I really.
Do you find him impressive?
I can't say one way or the other. I find a lot of people impressive. I find many people not impressive. But no, but I didn't go. He didn't come to my inauguration. He didn't come to my State of the Union speeches. And that's okay. That's his right. And again, nobody has done more for Black Americans than I have.
Jane, what kind of impact, again, do interviews like this have on Trump's base?
I don't think they really have very much of an impact, because I think that there's some element of this that is baked in. But I do think that it's important to say that when we're talking about Trump's base, I kind of compare it to the difference between people who are fans of a musician and the people who show up and go on tour with the musician. And so I think that there is an effective way. There are a lot of people who voted for Trump mostly because they didn't like Hillary Clinton. In fact, those numbers are pretty substantial among independent voters. And there are a lot of people who are now big supporters of the president, but they're not necessarily big supporters of everything he does. It's a transactional relationship. They support him on judicial nominations, for example. So I think these individual interviews, it's not like it gains more people towards Trump's base, to be clear. But I don't think it necessarily turns people away. It's really indicative, though, of how Trump thinks about anything, any subject is all in relation to himself. When he's talking about Ghislaine Maxwell, he's wishing her well. When he's talking about John Lewis, he's focusing on the fact that John Lewis did not attend his inauguration. But John Lewis also didn't attend the inauguration of George W. Bush, and George W. Bush gave an eulogy at John Lewis's funeral. So I think it's a remarkably self-centered attitude, but it's one that I think that for Trump's base, when you view him as against your opposition, the inherent reaction to everything else that's happening, well, you're kind of left with, we don't like everything he says, but he's better than the alternative. And I think that that's how he's kind of viewed by people who voted for him, which again is a little different from his base, so to speak.
We got this message from Joe on Facebook who says, I have an incredible respect for Jonathan Swan. What makes me laugh is the people saying he's one of the first reporters to ask hard-hitting questions of Trump. They weren't necessarily hard-hitting, they were just questions. Trump is the one who sounded like a buffoon just by being asked questions. Shane, President Trump attempted to cast doubt on the mail-in vote effort for November. He said, quote, there is no way you can go through a mail-in vote without massive cheating, end quote. Is the Intelligence Committee making a concerted effort to defend the security of voting by mail?
Well, I'm not necessarily voting by mail per se. They are more focused on attempting to counter disinformation efforts by Russia. I should note that what the president is doing about casting doubt on the security or the mail-in voting system is disinformation. It's simply not true. I mean, there are vanishingly small few examples of fraud in that system. Where the intelligence community goes to is trying to make sure that electronic databases where you store voter rolls, so that are checked when people show up at the polls, and also, election systems themselves where you actually tabulate the votes, that those are secure. The mail-in voting process actually has a long history. I mean, the military was voting by mail-in in the Civil War. Absentee voting is mail-in voting. That's a pretty reliable system at this point, in large part because it's based on paper and it's something tangible that people can count.
Well, speaking of misinformation, on Wednesday, Twitter and Facebook penalized President Trump for sharing misinformation about COVID-19 on their platforms. The posts in question, which were removed, included a clip from President Trump's interview on Fox and Friends, where he falsely claimed that children are, quote, almost immune, end quote, to the coronavirus. Jane, tell us more about the platform's responses to these posts.
So it's interesting because this was not aimed at President Trump's Twitter account. This was aimed at the campaign account for Team Trump, so to speak. And so Facebook removed the video of a Fox News interview in which he said that children are almost immune to COVID-19, which is untrue. And both Facebook and Twitter have been, took action. Twitter has been more aggressive about marking Trump's tweets for misinformation and for blocking his son from tweeting for 12 hours for breaking those misinformation rules.
Pretty sure they're just
But
petting
Mark
him.
Zuckerberg, the chief executive of Facebook, has essentially said that he's been under pressure a lot to remove posts that incite violence or attempt to suppress voting, while he said that he wants to be a champion of free speech. It's worth also saying that free speech on social media platforms are privately owned, and because of Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, because it's third-party content, as in something else, something that isn't being made by either Facebook or Twitter, they have the full right to edit or delete as they see fit. And it's interesting also because I think that there is a sense that one of the challenges we're seeing, though, is that there are reporters who wanted to tweet that this is misinformation, and those reporters got their accounts suspended. A colleague of mine did, and also a host of other people whose jobs are essentially to catch and inform on misinformation. So it seems that this effort to police misinformation on Twitter and on other social media platforms, they're still working out a lot of the kinks, and it seems to be extremely, it's an interesting process to observe. It's kind of, you're building the plane you're on as we are moving forward towards an election in which misinformation will play a large role.
Well, over the last few months, we've seen social media companies, as you say, crack down on misinformation about the coronavirus. But Jim, what do you make of these policies, particularly for a site like Facebook, whose chief executive Mark Zuckerberg has long made free speech a priority? But it sounds like, as Jane says, they're still working the kinks out.
Well, I mean, I think it's beyond working the kinks out. I don't think we have a massive problem with disinformation on a variety of platforms, social media being a particularly difficult one to police, and I think this is sort of the existential threat right now, actually, to all of these. On the one hand, they are taking more steps to try to crack down on things that are obviously perpetuating hoaxes or dangerous misinformation. On the other hand, they are coming under increased criticism, particularly from Republican lawmakers in Congress, claiming that they are trying to silence conservatives. And so I think this is going to be a thornier and thornier issue for these companies in Washington, and their relationship with the Trump administration has been certainly weird because of it, and it's going to get weirder, and it's hard for me to see an easy way out of it for the company, for any of these companies, but particularly for Facebook. But man, it is so important to the sort of functioning of a democracy that people are able to get accurate and clear information.
The beeping thing has been moved.
This is a sort of a challenge for our times.
We're rounding up the week's news with Jane Coaston of Fox, Shane Harris of the Washington Post, and Jen Tankersley of the New York Times. I'm Jen White. We'll hear more from you and our guests in a moment.
How long has this video been? Like an hour? 2 hours?
Angry presidents demand more answers and more aid.
We know that there are 7 workers trapped down there. Why aren't you searching for them?
Also, rare footage emerges from inside a Uyghur detention camp. And why did Spain's former king quit his country? I'm Jen White. It's the Friday News Roundup, next hour on 1A.
Stay with us. That conversation is coming up in just 20 minutes here on WAMU 88.5. Showers and a possible thunderstorm today. Some could produce very heavy rain with a high of 85 degrees. Tonight, rain is possible with a low of 69. It's 81 in Northwest Washington. Your unwanted vehicle can still get great mileage supporting WAMU. Proceeds from car donations directly fund the journalism that you rely on. Find out more about donating your vehicle at wamu.org/cars.
Support for WAMU comes from University of Maryland Global Campus, offering bachelor's and master's degrees for today's in-demand careers. Learn more at umgc.edu. Certified to operate in Virginia by SHED. Johns Hopkins Proton Therapy Center at Civil Memorial Hospital. Precise cancer care with less toxicity and an easier recovery. Visit hopkinsproton.org.
It's 10:40.
We're staying safe and
Support for NPR comes from this station and from C3. C3.ai software enables organizations to use artificial intelligence at enterprise scale, solving previously unsolvable business problems. Learn more at C3.ai. From Raymond James, a firm focused on transforming lives, businesses, and communities through tailored wealth management, banking, and capital market solutions. Learn more at raymondjames.com. And from the sustaining members of this NPR station.
Let's get back to the news roundup with Jane Coaston of Fox, Shane Harris of the Washington Post, and Jen Tankersley of the New York Times. The plans for the Democratic and Republican national conventions continue to evolve as both parties try to navigate the constraints of the pandemic. Shane, in an interview with Fox and Friends, President Trump floated the possibility of delivering his renomination speech from the White House. And his comments raised a question about whether delivering his speech there would even be illegal. So is it?
Well, there's this law called the Hatch Act, which federal employees know very well. It prohibits them from engaging in any kind of political activity. Mike Pompeo can't go out and campaign for Donald Trump. But there appears to be an exemption in it for the president and the vice president. So it appears that he wouldn't technically be in violation of that law. I think he clearly would be in the violation of the spirit of both the law and also how the White House has traditionally been used. Presidents, Republicans, and Democrats have avoided using it as a purely political prop. I mean, politics inevitably go into policy, but the idea of giving a the Republican nomination speech from the White House is really far afield from how other presidents have behaved. Barack Obama used to take campaign meetings in a room that was disconnected from the official part of the White House. That was really important. And George W. Bush took campaign meetings up in the residence. So technically Donald Trump can do it, but I think a lot of people are going to argue that he shouldn't do it even though he can.
Well, could there be any potential violation in terms of setting up for that speech? Could there be taxpayer dollars used, to pay people who work at the White House to get prepared?
Absolutely, and the RNC would have to be very careful about how they repay for any of those costs. And of course, if there are any White House staff that are then kind of seconded into preparing for that event, are they violating the Hatch Act? I know, is Kellyanne Conway violating it if she is somehow preparing for something at the White House, this kind of a speech? I mean, this really goes to the point of how, you know, campaigns traditionally work very hard to segregate anybody who is working in an official governmental capacity from people who are on the campaign. And as with so many of the people the way he behaves, he's just kind of blown apart the lines that normally separate those two spaces.
So where do the official RNC convention plans stand at this moment?
At this moment right now, they are not doing their big events in Florida. Of course, they were supposed that was going to be sort of the backup plan. Now the coronavirus pandemic has kind of overtaken that, and the president is saying they're scaling back. So it's looking increasingly like the Republicans are going to do what the Democrats are doing, which is going to this, you know, highly virtual convention. Joe Biden is not even going to be giving his acceptance speech at the actual convention site. He's going to do it from Delaware. So it's still evolving, but I think that you're going to see Republican and Democratic conventions that are largely driven by speeches from remote locations and a lot of TV. Brad Parscale, the former campaign
Alright, I'm gonna end the
manager,
video
has been
before
put
my
in charge
computer
now
runs
of
out of
blending
space, so bye guys.
speeches